Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the introduction to QuickBooks. This is again Kayla Javillo, and after week 1, I'm back with you to go over week 2. In this second week, we will be discussing how to manage income and expenses within the QuickBooks software. By the end of this week, you will have a refresher on week 1 and the content we have discussed last week. You will also learn new terminology that we will encounter several times during this week, practice tracking income and creating invoices, as well as understanding why these two items matter. Then you will gain more practice with recording expenses and managing vendors with QuickBooks. It sounds like we have a lot of hands-on practicing to do this week, but before we get into the new content, let's begin with a review of week 1. In week 1, I presented a high overview of what QuickBooks is. As a refresher, QuickBooks is a software for financial management. It tracks income, expenses, and generates reports. And it simplifies accounting for small businesses. The importance of QuickBooks is the emphasis on how it can assist accountants with clients, it helps small businesses succeed, it organizes finances efficiently, and it saves time and reduces errors. After going over QuickBooks, we also discuss how to set up a company file. Remember, to set up a company file, you will have to enter business details. This includes your business name, business address, industry, etc. You will also have to input some customization settings for your business needs. Let's recall that after I have demonstrated setting up your company file in QuickBooks, we then went over the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts, which can be abbreviated to the COA, categorizes financial data, it enables accurate tracking and reporting, and it provides insights for business decisions. To note, the chart of accounts incorporates the sub-accounts within the following 5 groups. Assets, which is what the business owns. Liabilities, this is what the business owes. Equity, this is the owner's investment in the business. Income, which are the earnings a business receives. And expenses, which are the costs a company incurs. With that weekly review of our first week together, we have also went over how to navigate through Westminster's systems. If you are not yet comfortable with accessing these sources we discussed last week, please go back to the modules and review that content. Now that you have a refresher of week 1, let's get into some new terminology that we will encounter this week. Some relevant accounting terms that we will see during this week include revenue. This is the total amount earned before any expenses the company incurs. There's invoice, which is a formal document issued by a seller to a buyer. And a vendor. This is an individual or company that supplies goods or services. With some of that new terminology, let's now get into tracking income and creating invoices. Here are the steps to create an invoice in QuickBooks. First, navigate to a new invoice. 2. Set up invoice. Third, you would like to add items or services. 4. Apply the discounts, taxes, and additional charges to that invoice. And 5. Save and send. Here's a screenshot of what an invoice in QuickBooks can look like. Now that you have seen the steps on how to create an invoice, let me demonstrate it for you in QuickBooks. So here you can see that I'm in my home page of my sample company. To get to invoices, let's go to the sidebar, and under Sales, we can select Invoices. From here, to create a new invoice, we'll just go to the right-hand corner over here and select the green button that says Create Invoice. It will prompt you to the screenshot that you saw in the PowerPoint. From here, you could enter the customer name, which you can add a new one or select from the list below. Enter the contact information, the address, some terms, the invoice date, and the due date. You will then enter the product or service, a description, the quantity, rate, amount, and tax. You can apply a discount percentage here. And if you need help with sales tax, it will calculate it for you based on the state. From there, you can save and send. Now that we have seen how to create an invoice in QuickBooks, let's now talk about tracking income and why tracking matters. Let's first start with revenue tracking. Revenue tracking involves the process of recording sources of income, timing of earnings, and the collection of payments from invoices. There is also expense tracking. Some key aspects of this process includes the category of the expense, the actual versus budgeted amounts of the expense, documentation and substantiation of the expense, and identifying expense trends. So why does tracking matter? Tracking reflects profitability of a business. It assists in budget management. It impacts crucial decision-making for your business. And it is compliant with reporting standards. With tracking in mind, let me explain an important concept: cash versus accrual accounting. There are two types of accounting methods. One, there's cash basis. This is when revenue and expenses are recorded only when cash is received or paid. There is also accrual basis. This is when revenue and expenses are recorded when they are earned or incurred, regardless of when cash is received or paid. This is an important aspect for your business, so I recommend keeping this in mind. Okay, now that you have an idea of tracking and why it matters, let's now change gears and move into recording expenses and managing vendors. The next two slides will show you screenshots of the two items. I will like you to view them, then I will demonstrate the process for both recording expenses and managing vendors in QuickBooks after. Here is a screenshot of what tracking expenses will eventually look like in your QuickBooks account. As you can see, it includes the date, the type, the payee, the category, and the total for each expense listed. Next, here's a screenshot of what your vendor list can potentially look like. This list incorporates the vendor name, company name, some contact information, the balance, and some actions. With those screenshots in mind, let me now demonstrate on how to navigate to expenses and vendors in QuickBooks. So starting out in my home page of my sample company, let's go to the sidebar here, and under the Expenses tab, let's just click on Expenses. From here, you can see the screenshot that was provided in the PowerPoint. Here we can make a new transaction by clicking this green button, and then we will go to a new expense. From here, you could fill out the information of the expense and the details. If you make a new expense, make sure to save and close. And then, for the expenses listed here, you can also view and edit any of the expenses. When you do that, you can edit any information that you have inputted at an earlier date. Just remember, if you edit any expense, make sure to save and close. Now let's go into vendors. To access vendors, you could go again to the sidebar here, under expenses, and click vendors. Or, as you can see, there are tabs up here, and you could just click on vendors. From here, again, you could create a new vendor from clicking this green button. You will have to enter some name and contact information, some addresses, and other additional information. Make sure if you have a new vendor and fill this out, click Save. Then, for your existing vendors, there are additional actions you could make here. You could create a bill, schedule payments, and if you click this arrow here, you could create an expense, write a check, create purchase order, or make a vendor inactive. Okay, now that we have visualized how to access the expenses and vendors in QuickBooks, let's now get into our activity for this week. In this activity, we will be recording income and expenses with some mock data. Here, I have provided a practice scenario of a company where it lists some information of the income received and an expense incurred. Let's transfer this information from the example together step by step in QuickBooks. With the first example provided, let's first create an invoice. From my home page here, let's go to the sidebar, and under Sales, let's click on Invoice. From here, let's create a new invoice. Okay, I will type in the customer name. And since ABC Tech Solutions, the customer, is not existing just yet, we will have to add them as a new customer. Let's just put this information for now. Click Save. We need a customer email, so let me just make up one. Okay. We will put the invoice date, which is 1/01/2025. Happy New Year. And we could leave the due date just at that. For product or service, let's click on Design, as is listed as a design service. In the description, we could keep it as custom design, or we could input payment from a client for logo design services. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at custom design. We've done this action one time at a rate of 1,200. Now it changes the total or the balance to $1,200. We don't have a discount percentage, and for tax purposes, let's keep it as California. From there, save and send. Confirm this information, and then you will be able to send and close. Since it was a make-believe company, the email was not sent. In the same example, let's now enter an expense transaction. Again, from my homepage, let's go to the sidebar here, go under Expenses, and click on Expense. To make a new transaction, let's click on this green button and select Expense. From here, let's enter Adobe Incorporated as the payee. And again, we will have to add them as a new vendor. Let's just keep the information as that and save. The payment date was January 2nd. Let's change that. Let's say the payment method was a check, a reference number of 101. And for category, since it is a software subscription, let's click this arrow and select dues and subscriptions. For description, we can enter purchase of graphic design software. Okay. Oops. And then for the amount, it was $60. And there, you can see the amount is $60 for a monthly subscription. And now let's save and close. There you go. You should be able to see the new expense that you have created. And then if we go back to sales and invoices, we could see the new invoice we also created. Okay, now that we have walked through this example together, let's now practice on this example on your own. Okay, sorry. Okay, now that we have walked through this example together, let me provide you with a different example for you to do on your own. Notice here on the invoice, you have tax and a discount rate. The same for the expense. The information should be the same. Nothing new. Just pay attention to the invoice information. Good luck and have fun practicing.